Hello, everyone. I'm David March, and welcome to the episode Land of Confusion, episode, I believe, number 61, where we're inventing Hank Roadie, or so it seems. And this is my co-host, Flicker.
How do you do?
Howdy.
So we were just having a few interesting conversations before we pressed the record button, but why don't we follow up on that? What was the statement?
Well, let me just say that I live on Guam, and the local the historic population of Guam is Chamorro, and it turns out that Hank Roadie is 100% Chamorro. I think, did I get that right?
Pretty much. So one of the steps that I neglected to mention in that brief biography I sent over, in between losing my job at the door factory and going back to school for nanoscience, I took names for the U.S. Census in 2010. So it paid well, and I did it in northern Wisconsin in April, which was a real nice time to go walking around in the woods and see people's hunting cabins and verify that nobody actually lives there. So that part of the job was actually all kinds of fun. Talking to people, that wasn't as much fun, but I did meet some very interesting folks. I've met one couple, for example. She was 95 and he was 98. And I said, I'll see you again in 10 years. And they said, oh, no, you won't. Or there was one guy also in his 90s in an apartment block, like not far from my house, who had stormed Normandy. And I said, well, I don't think we're going to be calling you back. And he says, I'd come if they called me. What do you say to that? Anyway, one form that I did not, in fact, collect was the one from my house. And when the lady came by and gave her numbers to my father, I found out that I, in fact, have proud Chamorro heritage, because that's the ethnicity that we got in that census.
Wow. Well, then you actually can vote in the plebiscite here. The plebiscite involves whether or not Guam is going to remain a territory of the United States or become an independent nation. And apparently residents that aren't Chamorro, going on the 1950 census and their descendants, they are the only ones that get to vote. And people that have been here for 30 and 40 years are transplants, and they don't get to vote in the plebiscite. So maybe you can vote on my behalf.
Yeah, right. They require photo ID.
Oh, do they? No. You know this for a fact, because I
mean, nowhere else in your country seems to require photo ID for voting. I'm surprised that would require in Guam.
I don't know how they're determining who had great grandparents that were Chamorro citizens in 1950. I don't know how they're determining that. It's interesting. I personally think that well, I know it's not. Let's not talk about me. Let's talk about you, Hank.
Yep.
Well, just as a general observation, it seems to me that plebiscites are a great idea, but it's very hard to iron out all the details when you actually try and take one.
Especially when you're talking about Aboriginals claiming their land back. If they're only 50% of the population, or I think they're probably less than 50% of the population. But yeah, what about the other 52%? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's always the best way to hold a plebiscite is when you invade the country and then you register your troops as such. That's something only the Russians I understand.
Of course, the residents. I can point you straight to the earthworks.
So we got a couple of members' questions we'll go through first before we get to you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One from Aaron Miller. Well, he's actually asked really the two questions, most pertinent questions. Who knows more about concrete, you or concrete wall?
Concrete wall by a mile. Concrete is a fascinating subject which I have not studied enough of. I have had my occasional intimate acquaintance, as my still missing tooth can tell you.
Well, how'd you lose your tooth? How
Yeah, what's
did
that story?
a concrete brick hit you, or what happened?
Let's see. It was December 27th of 2016. I had This is the first night that the winter got really cold that year in Wisconsin. So I spent all morning getting my car battery to start and getting that replaced. And I spent much of the evening at work trying to make up for that time. So exiting the building at 7:30, I was done and ready to be out of there. And so I went down a short flight of stairs, rather precipitously. Let's just fast forward to the nurse asking questions in the hospital. How far did you fall? All the way to the bottom. How many steps? I don't know. I didn't have time to count them on the way down. It's a flight
You're a
of 10
bad
stairs.
patient.
Face planted on the concrete, busted my jaw pretty good, broken arm. Still have braces because of it, because they need to align my teeth before they can put the new tooth in, and that's been taking longer than I would like.
I have just been to the benefit of a recent new tooth installation, and it went very well once it actually got done, but I was supposed to get it originally before COVID.
Yeah, right. That didn't speed matters up anyways. Well, we can't get in for adjustment. It turns out the orthodontist is shut down. In the future, call us when your wire breaks like that. Well, yeah, but you guys weren't open anyway.
And Aaron also asked, what are the designated roles among the Roadie clan? Who is the king?
Well, since old Harold RHODY passed on, I don't know that there's a unified king of the Roadie clan.
A unified king. I can imagine what the flag would look like.
I can imagine several flags. So all of us that count anyways are descended from Harold RHODY, who'd be my grandfather. Old Dan RHODY, who is on a Ricochet hiatus right now, is his son, and the other Roadies that you'll see around the site, Sam and Caleb, are my brothers. Somewhat famously, we have a dispute with the weird Roadies, which is mostly over which one of us actually are the weird Roadies. But let me get out ahead of that right now and say that they are.
Okay.
They're all descended from my father's younger brother, Don.
Well, that's weird.
Yes, they are.
Well, what does weird mean to a roadie?
I mean, much the same as it does to the rest of us, but it does tend to be taken to a greater scale. So let me tell you a story about my cousin Nathaniel, who is one of the weird Roadies. Nathaniel, when he was a kid, became real obsessed with Scotland, and it started with the movie Braveheart and sort of went on from there. So he's the guy who taught himself to play the bagpipes. So one year he went over and did a foreign student thing at a farm in Scotland, where he would do manual labor and I'm not sure what all. But one of the benefits of being in Scotland is that you have access to castles, which you just don't get in northern Wisconsin. So he was visiting a castle in the rain and just sort of enjoying the place. And as he's there, he gets stumbled on by a tourist who sees him in his homespun garb, and it just naturally assumes that he's working there. Can you help me? No. It was sort of an awkward conversation, at least for the tourist.
Well, at least he didn't have a kilt on.
He may have had a kilt on, I don't know.
Okay, well, I see in your brief bio you sent me, you grew up living in northern Wisconsin. What was it like to grow up in northern Wisconsin?
So I come from the town of Spirit, and you haven't heard of it. And even if you live in northern Wisconsin, there's a pretty good chance you haven't heard of it. It's a town so small that the town hall actually sits outside the Welcome to Spirit signs. Really, it's yeah, that one's literally true. It is a intersection on the map, but this was
And you were born in the town, within the city limits.
I was born in a hospital about 15, 20 minutes away, but
Oh, so you're a foreigner then.
yeah, right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I guess properly speaking, my story starts about 5 generations back when old Heinrich Roadie had a habit of drinking beer and talking politics and had to leave Prussia real quick. So he came to America, he settled in Milwaukee, and he was working as a steam engineer there. And well, old habits die hard, and he sort of had to get out of town fairly quickly too. So he ended up in the Wisconsin Northwoods, which is where your lumber trade was booming at that time. And so I come back from a couple of generations of lumberjacks in that regard. One story that my grandfather told me when he was out in the out working in the 1930s, and he's a teenager young man at this point. They had one order for a couple long perfect birch logs, and if you found one and you cut it down and you didn't think that it was perfect, you just let it lie and go and get the next one. And the story was that these were getting shipped to Mussolini, who was a character at that time. Fast forward a couple years, my grandfather's in the infantry. He's in World War II. He's doing a little R&R in Rome. And he gets in and he finds Mussolini's Olympic swimming pool. And he looks, and by the doorpost are these nice 20-foot some birch logs. And he thinks, oh, I know where those came from. So, right. Back to Spirit, right? So I lived in a home on County YY, literally across the street from the church that we attended. Grandpa lived 2 miles down the road on German Settlement. That's the name of the road. There were a lot of Germans in the area. The Lutheran church had like 40 acres of swamp there, which seemed illimitable when I was a kid, but seemed a little bit sad in comparison when I came back. But still, it was just great having a swamp to go roving in. Mm-hmm. So one time, not long before we were moving out of Spirit, there was a garage sale trying to get rid of some of our stuff before we had to pack it. And my mother was getting rid of a bunch of her chintzy jewelry from when she was a girl, just cheap plastic stuff, but it looked fancy. Mm-hmm. So us boys, I had a lot of cousins in the area. Some of them were weird. I'd venture to say that all of them are weird, but to varying degrees. We found her box of jewelry in the free section, so we took it and we buried it all in the swamp.
Did you ever find it again?
Yes, the location was fairly well known.
Okay.
I mean, as a matter of a OPSEC, I wouldn't recommend this method, at least the way that we did it at that time. And certainly as a matter of leaving pirate gold for future generations to find it, too many people knew the secret.
Okay, what is it next here? So you went to college to get into and studied physics. That seems to be a a very specific thing to get into.
Yeah. So there are a couple reasons for that. Not the least of them is that I like the look that people's eyes get when I tell them, "Oh yeah, I'm studying physics." But there's that. There is the fact that I was just sort of good at it from the little that I'd gotten in high school. And there's also the fact that when you know physics, you do sort of know something fundamental about how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
When when you're describing the motion of a particle and you have Newton's laws, that's really it. I mean, you get into complications on Newton's laws, but you never really stop with F equals ma.
So what kind of things that does your appreciation of physics allow you to understand when you're walking around?
Well, not the way that people move. Um, sorry, I just had a good one and I've forgotten it now. It comes up from time to time. I wrote that how do you build a computer series on Ricochet, and part of the reason that I wrote it was because I knew something that just wasn't covered in the classes I had at the tech about that, or the work stuff, and that was the quantum mechanical basis for semiconductors. I won't say that I knew that. I just knew a little bit about it from taking Quantum 2 in that physics course back in the day. And you can find that it has hand-drawn graphs, which are pretty obviously hand-drawn in MS Paint, but let's leave that aside. The way it works is that you get your band gap potential. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be able to summarize a half-remembered bit of quantum mechanics entirely verbally on a podcast. But the way that that you have semiconductors, the reason they work is because it disrupts the normal band gap, and the normal band gap comes out of the nature of a particle moving in a periodic potential, as in if you have an electron bouncing around in a box of atoms.
Okay.
You've got protons and you've got electrons and you've got other things that that every so often just show up as I don't know, like pins on a pinball machine for it to bounce off of.
Okay then. So I see you, of course, managed to take your love of physics and all that great degree, and you got yourself promptly a job making doors.
Yeah, apparently that's what I was qualified for. Well, I didn't want to go to grad school, and part of that was because I did burn out a little bit on physics. And it got to the point where you're looking at all the people in the department and deciding that I'm in the bottom three, and that's probably not a good indicator if I should go to grad school. And while I say I'm in the bottom three, I don't know if that was entirely due to a raw intelligence. There was some of that, but there's also a lot of these people were more willing to do the work. So there's that. And there's also the fact that it takes a lot of paperwork and whatnot to get into grad school, and I'm just not very big on that. And having to do that while you're also trying to do your last level of classes, it's a real imposition. So despite my mother's best hopes, I didn't go on to grad school. So what do you do with a bachelor's in physics? Well, once you've decided that you're not actually studying any more physics, you're sort of stuck with getting an engineering job somewhere, and that's a lot harder to do when you're competing against people who have engineering jobs that are actually in the job description.
Mm-hmm.
If you need a mechanical engineer, you can hire a mechanical engineering major rather than a physicist, probably.
Yeah.
So fast forward a bit of a fruitless job searching, also a thing that I really hate to do and do not do effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And I end up drilling holes in boards. Let's see, I was on the patio door line, and you've got 2 ups and downs, 2 left to rights, and you put those together with wood glue and wooden dowels. And I was putting holes in the boards that produce those.
Okay.
Well, that seems.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. I was just making it okay.
Oh, is that seems to be actually using a lot. Hanging doors seems to take a lot more physics than hanging drywall. It seems. So, you got that.
Yeah, possibly, but they mostly needed me because I could show up on time and be sober most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time, show up on time. I was pretty much sober all the time. Yeah, I mean, it was factory work, and it wasn't all that engaging. I did manage to read several good books in the 5-minute breaks and the 15 minutes or half hour of lunch. I got through Paradise Lost and Crime and Punishment and Heart of Darkness that year.
Okay, that's pretty
What
good.
all else? Yeah, right.
I've only read Heart of Darkness, so of those 3.
I've read it, but I don't remember it.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
the great thing is you can always just go watch Francis Ford Coppola's version of it. I found that much more entertaining.
What was that? You mean Apocalypse? What?
Apocalypse
yeah.
Now.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think that I forget his name. The guy who the famous actor in it. He didn't.
Martin
The
Sheen?
whole.
Martin Sheen?
No. Dang, Marlon Brando.
Yes.
Marlon Brando. Maybe he was just misdirected, but I don't think that he actually captured the villain in Heart of Darkness terribly well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was kind of the start of his phase of where he was just showing up and having fun, or showing up for a paycheck. He was no longer quite the Marlon Brando of earlier age.
Yeah.
Well, what did you do? Go ahead.
To remembering the book, you don't really have to. My friend Matt Balzer has a theory that you don't actually have to have seen the original, just so long as you know the relevant bits. So as long as you can drop an occasional the horror into a conversation, you should be good.
That's the one line I don't want to ever repeat. But I really did like the remake with Charlie Sheen, or not Charlie Sheen. Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. What was that? That was where Charlie Sheen played a special forces guy, and he's going up the Mekong as his father is coming down the Mekong.
You mean Hot Shots Part 2?
Oh yeah. That's it. I'm surprised that didn't get an Academy Award.
I know, right?
Yeah, 2 Sheens in one shot.
Yes, and I believe the relevant line there was, "I loved you in Wall Street."
Yeah. So after you were drilling holes and doors for a while, and the Great Recession hit, and you ended up moving down to Eau Claire. So what was that like?
Yeah, so it involved a lot of short weeks first, where they're just cutting down hours because they weren't getting any orders.
Mm-hmm.
The door factory tends to depend rather strongly on the construction business.
Mm-hmm.
And when the housing market collapses, you don't have all that much new construction going on. So eventually we got it was Thursday, and we got the motivational, "Well, you're what's left. And so we're leaner, we're more efficient. You guys are the best of the best. And then on Friday, I got laid off. So I figured that makes me the worst of the best of the best. So, okay. Spent a little time taking names for the census. Oh, right. One more thing. They gave us a sign to put in the back of our car windows. It says, "Official government business, makes frequent stops." I put it on the bathroom door. So I spent a little more time noodling around, not actually getting a job in physics or anything. And so my old man suggested that I go in for an upgrade. And he had done this himself a couple of years back, going through the electromechanical program at the Wausau Tech, which was a little closer to where we were living at the time. But in this case, moved down to Eau Claire and enrolled in CBTC, the Chippewa Valley Technical College. This was the nanoscience program, which they've since renamed it or split it up a bit. But effectively, it was this is how you become a wafer fab technician. But excuse me, they also had sides of it that were dealing with biology and other things. And as a matter of fact, I really enjoyed the cell biology portion of the course. It is so. Going back to my career as a physicist, part of becoming a physicist is that you have to learn to disdain literally every other discipline with some amount of fear. So I never had much of a beef with the biologists, but ask me about the business majors or the engineers or the arts types, yada yada yada. But one of the problems with school, possibly with young people generally, I mean, I don't know if this is a solvable problem, but you focus real hard on what you're doing and not so much on everything else. And so I never got into cell biology over the course of my actual college career. But this time, it was wonderful stuff to learn. There are so many things that go on in there that are just blow your mind fascinating. Like there are proteins that will they're microtubule strands going through the cell, and there are proteins that will walk along it. Just moves one step, sticks, moves one step, sticks, and it's being powered by a random collision with an ATP molecule, adenosine triphosphate. It's a common energy storage molecule that comes around in the cell, and every step that it takes, it's burning off one of those bonds, turning it from triphosphate into diphosphate. And it can pull an amazing load moving along the tubule like this. And that's just not something you ever hear about.
Yeah.
This wasn't in my high school biology class at all, which sort of went over the cell for about 2 weeks before moving on to larger things. And that was also interesting because about as soon as you get larger than a cell, my interest drops off precipitously. Like tissues, organs, I don't know. It just sort of
That's just
sort of
redundancy.
doesn't stick.
Well, the cell sounds a lot like how you're describing your particles in the box earlier in the podcast. The cell, it sounds like you have a real fascination with the small things in existence and how it all works together to make these, how a single cell can be a incredibly complex engineering masterpiece like a car can be, even though it's this tiny little thing that we flake off ourselves.
Yeah, right. Although you're trying to get me to walk back that F equals ma, you never walk past it bit, right? Because in quantum mechanics, it's all energy and not so much force. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Sorry, I've got about 3 directions I'm trying to take this in, and I can't
That's no
decide
problem.
between which of them.
Well, talk about ATP some more then.
Right. So
No, seriously.
Yeah.
You're saying that random Brownian motion actually is sort of acts as a catalyst between ATP and the
right,
molecule that. Wow, just that. I mean, you can't get more physics than that in biology, can you?
right. And that was a question I explicitly asked about, because it seemed like they're relying on a lot of things. So when you're a lot of random motion. So when you're all right, so you make a new protein, high level process. You read a bit of the DNA encoding off into an RNA strand, and the RNA strand gets processed through a ribosome. And the ribosome is a large protein itself, but it can read the RNA strand and connect an appropriate amino acid and fold all that amino acid into its own protein. And each step along that way is governed largely by Brownian motion to get the molecule into the right spot, and then it's all intramolecular forces getting it to stick properly. And if it isn't the right shape molecule, it won't stick properly. And the next one. So when the RNA strand is in the ribosome, and you need and here I'm going to completely fail to remember any actual amino acid names. But if you need GAC and you've got TAC, well, maybe that sorry, it's just not going to fit. It's going to, if that molecule gets there, it'll hit, it won't stick in the right amount, and it'll bounce off. And then it'll hit there and bounce off again, because Brownian motion is completely random and nonsensical, I guess I'd say it. But eventually you get the proper molecule to hit and stick, and the machinery moves one step forward, and you get another molecule to hit again, and maybe the GAC is the right one here, or what have you. And that seemed like completely illogical to me while I was taking it, because how long do you have to wait for something to randomly fall into your pocket like that? And I guess on the time cycles and the size that they're describing, it actually works out. I haven't verified this any more than what my professor told me, but I believed him at the time.
Do you think when you're in class taking all this stuff, do you think that your physics background gave you more of an insight that many of the other students might not have picked up on in such examples as what you just gave?
So perhaps one thing that physics does for you, it really does train you to think logically. And this might not be rigorous logic in human affairs and whatnot, because there's a lot more going on there than just what you can derive from this molecule interacts with that molecule. But it really does give you a way of being able to look at things and figure out what's going on and work from there. Although the math did occasionally come in handy too. This was a tech school course. At least at some level, it was geared towards high school screw-ups, So the math wasn't calculus based or anything, but we did occasionally see things like, oh, well, this is the equation for phases and 3-phase power, and I go, okay, got it. When nobody else nobody else in the room actually knows what's going on there. I can still read an equation like I can still read an equation like it's in Greek, but probably better than that. That was one of the gags I had as a physicist was, oh yeah, I'm learning Greek just one letter at a time. All the constants in physics are represented by Greek letters.
Right.
But that's also useful, being able to look at a thing and say, okay, as this goes up, this must go down, or as this varies, this has to vary by the square of it. So you get an intuitive feel for graphs and whatnot. Early on in COVID, I was a little excited that everybody knew what a exponential curve looked like now, so I could talk about exponential curves.
So why don't we get into a little bit of your other passion that you've recently gotten into in the last few years, freelance philosophy.
Yeah, right. And if being a physicist wasn't easy to pay the bills with, freelance philosophy, honestly, I can't imagine a job that's any worse on the general market.
But you can do that as a street performer, right?
Sure, why not? Right. I'm back in the MST job, and I sort of treat that as a side gig, as something that I can do on the side while I'm doing philosophy as my main occupation. Although honestly, I don't even know I'm out of school on the philosophy bit. It's sort of a question of a divine training program, and I really don't think that it helps to assume the Almighty works on human timescales. So that's one of the questions that I've been noodling about, which is apparently my new phrase, noodling about. The nature of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
The common phrase is that God is outside of time, and usually that's used as a get out of jail free card for having to understand a point of theology or something. Well, how does free will correspond with predestination? Well, God's outside of time, so it doesn't matter to him, or something like that. I don't like weak. I don't like that. It seems like a weak argument, but I do think that God is outside of time, and I don't know what all that implies. One of the things that I think it does imply is that you can't assume a God works off of a human time scale. So the example in this is Moses. Moses, before he gets out and does the whole 10 Commandments bit, before he gets to let my people go, he spends 40 years as a person in the Egyptian court. Mm-hmm. And then Moses has an idea of what he needs to do. He knows he needs to free the Israelites. And so he has a plan on how to do that. And he does it by killing an Egyptian who is abusing an Israelite. I don't know if this is a well thought out plan, but it made sense at the time. Mm-hmm. Well, that didn't work out for him. He had to flee, right? So he spends another 40 years on the backside of the desert, learning from a priest in Midian. Mm-hmm. And then he's 80 years old. Mm-hmm. Then God sends a burning bush and says, go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't exactly all that Charlton Heston looking at the time, but yeah, you take what you can get.
Yeah. Well, so how does
go ahead?
How does God's view of time, how does it interact with the scenario you just said? Is it that God has more patience, or how does him being outside of time affect the story of Moses?
Well, in this case, I mean, at the very simplest level, and I'm not saying that I've gotten much beyond the very simplest level, but tell me another job that you start in at 80. God needed the right man to lead Israel, and so he spent 80 years molding this guy to become the guy that he needed to be, and that included all the sophistication of the Egyptian court and all the desert survival that he got out in Midian, among other things. Right? You could say more than this, but so there is that, and you can also do it on the flip side too. And this is dangerous territory because here I'm speaking of what I don't actually know about.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have like a 10-year-old that gets killed, that is a tragedy. But yeah, that's a tragedy. But, and this is why it's dangerous territory, because there's just no way that what I'm saying is in any way appropriate to someone who's actually had a child killed or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But you get the impression that the extent of man's years only exist as what God needs them to be. Mm-hmm. That human time is important, but it's not as important as eternity. So if your 10-year-old child has fulfilled everything that God wanted from them from their lifetime, then they're done. They've graduated. They can get out of here. Mm-hmm. Is sort of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I believe that. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, actually. I did have a friend who died at the age of 32, and I've always kind of thought that he basically fulfilled everything that he was put on the earth to do, as well as he was ever going to do it. You know.
Yeah.
There's an episode of an old TV show called Titus, and in the show, the guy would have these kind of like side flashbacks or anything like that. And one time he gets like a thing where like every one of his close relatives, all the other cast come in and tell him about some great important thing he's done. He's like, "Oh, you're going to get we just got a call from Chevrolet. They want you to make your own car, the Titus." And then it's like his wife comes in, "Oh, I've got this thing." And then his father comes in, who's always the disapproving father. So like, "Great job, great relationship, everything's going well for you." And he's like, and the character's like, "I've never been more happier in my life." And goes in another room and kills himself. And the father's like, "Well, he did. Well, it's fair. He did peak."
Yeah.
So like, the answer
that was a thing
also,
that
I'm in what's called wargaming, and there is a old line comic in wargaming about a guy, because in wargaming you get miniatures, and you always buy miniatures and you never paint them all. Mm-hmm. One guy walks into the hobby store and he's like, "I've finally done it. Well, I finally painted all my miniatures." And then he dies of a heart attack. And the guy beside him is like, "Give me 5 pounds of Prussian stat."
Yeah, I used to play Magic down at the Fountain of Youth in Eau Claire, and they had the Warhammer guys were playing their games in the back roughly at the same time. Mm-hmm. So every so often between rounds, I'd go back and say hi, and they said, "You know, you really only need one army." And I say, oh no, I heard that about the Magic cards." That's as close as I ever got to playing Warhammer myself.
Yeah. Okay, so a little time. Press the wrong button there. Yeah, and then and of course, you are one of the many denizens of the pit. How do you find life in the pit?
Probably ought to find it more worrisome than I do, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a free-flowing conversation. It has the whole people I hate background. Mm-hmm. And so it has a strong principle of being able to fling mud around. And that helps quite a bit because it lets you make joke insults. Occasionally they get taken too far.
Yeah.
And occasionally people step over boundaries that that really do exist, and there's trouble. But it helps very much in that you don't have to be making serious, interesting points, which you try to in the rest of Ricochet, except for Percival. I think he's always making a gag somewhere. All right.
How is nesting going to improve the pit?
That part is an open question. Yeah, I don't know. The Blue Yeti said that they get that requested a lot. I don't know from whom, because it seems to be death from all of the more established members. But you do get that occasionally, where someone posts 3 paragraphs and 2 pictures and 1 comment, and it's about a foot long on your screen. And then someone replies to it with a 1-line reply, and then they have to reply back with it. And you get the same block quoted multiple times, and that's real annoying.
Yeah.
And I tend to deal with that by one, posting on a computer where I can just highlight a bit and quote that and do that, and 2, resenting the people who post from their phones and don't. But that's, I think, the problem that nesting comments is good for solving. I do not think that it's any good at clicking on a thread, reading it once, and coming back later and reading what's been updated. I think it's just death for that, and I think that's I think it's going to be impossible to maintain the pit under those standards.
Yeah,
maybe not impossible, but difficult.
My one suggestion would be, because we have a lot of like buttons coming on Ricochet where they're like, do you want this optional? And let they post off there, determine whether or not they want nested comments on their thread or not. And I wonder if, hopefully that's a functionality that can happen. So then if you're like one of the editors or something going to the main feed, you can have the nested comments there, and then members feed can be just the wild free for all it is. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, that would be that would probably be better. We'll see.
You mean the nested feed, the main, the way we have it now, I guess they call it the flat feed, would be for the members side, and then when a post gets promoted to the main feed, it changes format to the nested comments.
Or you have a switch on the like right now, you have some switches at the bottom that say, you want to know if the comments are on, you want to know this, you want to know that. You can just put on the bottom there, nested comments or not.
I thought that having 2 systems was either not doable or was too complex to work out. That seems to be the emphasis I get between the great Henry Racet and Mark Camp argument that goes on. Do you think that's possible to actually toggle between the 2?
System, right? So
yeah, I don't think that we have a very good understanding of what is and isn't possible in software at this point. Whenever you have a system, and this is another thing that I learned in physics, is how to define an arbitrary system. But whenever you have a system of rules for a thing, it seems to work very well for certain things and very poorly for others. And so at work right now, they're trying to move from an old Lotus Notes system. Yeah, exactly. And that's why they're trying to move from it. And there are plenty of good reasons for it. But they're moving to an internet-based system. And the problem with the internet-based system is that you can no longer just copy paste pictures right into it. You have to save the file, give it a name, and upload it. And the last time I tried to do that, it gave me an error anyways. So despite the fact that this was a solved problem, and that 20 years ago this was a solved problem, and it worked so well in the old system, we just can't do it in the new system. And there are plenty of things to be said for the new system. we are losing a significant amount of functionality and value by losing that one thing that it was never designed to do.
Mhm.
So let me try and wend this back, and let me try and remember where I was that I was wending this back to.
Ricochet nested comments and the pet.
Right, exactly. What nested comment solves well is that problem I was describing earlier of quoting the original bit over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And what it does very poorly, I think, is allow for a free-flowing conversation. I think it's better in places like Reddit where you get too many comments in a second to even keep track of a conversation.
Mhm.
But I don't think it'll work out all that well here.
Okay.
Or in the current system, all you have to do is just make it so that it doesn't automatically, it only automatically captures the single previous comment, and then you can expand that upwards to include the entire comment if you wish. But that seems like an easy.
Right? Yeah, and that's one thing I've learned about programming is that just because it seems like it ought to be easy doesn't mean that it is.
Well, we have that capability right now. You can pick out any portion of a comment and include it in your own comment as a quote, or you can just make a comment without quoting, and then it doesn't, your comment is freestanding, or you can reply, which quotes the entire comment. It seems like instead of replying and quoting the entire comment, it seems like it would be easy to change that, that it only includes the most recent comment in that thread that you're otherwise quoting the entirety of. I just don't see that. I don't see the problem with that, frankly.
Sounds like we should bring back Max on and ask him a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll reach out to him the next week and see if we can get that going in the next few weeks. And hey, this has been pretty good there, Hank. It's been a wild and crazy ride from a small town in Wisconsin to the nested comments on Ricochet. I want to thank you for stopping by and giving us an hour of your time.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Yeah. And I guess once again, from Land of Confusion, we'll be seeing you and everyone else on Ricochet in the comments. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.